I'm Cheryl Leach. In this problem, we're going to be looking at an application from economics. We're going to be talking about the consumer surplus and the producer surplus when we're given a demand function and a supply function. Well, let's begin by talking about what a demand function actually is. Well, the demand function shows the relationship between X, which is the quantity sold, and P, which is the price. If you think about this, when the price is high, you won't be able to sell very many units. However, as the price drops, more people will be willing to buy your product, and so our function is decreasing. The supply curve, on the other hand, looks at it from the perspective of the producer. When the price is low, not as many producers are going to be willing to supply your product, which means there won't be as many available to buy. So, as the price increases, the number of suppliers and the quantity that is supplied also increases. The supply function is typically an increasing function. Well, the consumers are looking for the price to lower. The suppliers are looking for it to increase. So where's the balance point? It's called the equilibrium point. And the equilibrium point occurs at the intersection of the demand and supply curves. Well, we know how to do this mathematically. We take the two equations and set them equal to each other. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to have 50 minus 0.5x, and that's going to equal 0.125x. Getting all the x's on one side, I have 50 equals 0.625x, and that happens when x is 80 units. So my equilibrium point has an x-coordinate of 80. To get the price at that equilibrium point, I can plug it into either one of those equations. And if I plug 80 into either one, I'm going to end up with a y-coordinate of 10. So the market price, or what we want to sell our item at, is going to be $10. And if we do that, we should be able to sell 80 units. Okay, now that we have an understanding of the demand and supply function, let's go ahead and take a look at the consumer surplus and the producer surplus. So, what is consumer surplus? Well, it's the difference between what people are willing to pay versus what they actually have to pay. Remember, the market price is $10. We're selling our item at $10, but there were some people who were willing to pay more. So what's the difference in that? Well, if you take your demand curve and then subtract what happens at this orange line, which represents the price, we have a region. And we know that we can calculate the area of that region, which will be the consumer surplus, by using a definite integral. So let's go ahead and take a look at what integral I need to use. To get the area, I know I need the top function minus the bottom function. The top function in this case is the demand curve. So we'll take the demand, and then we need to subtract this horizontal orange line, which represents the price that I'm selling my units at. So I'm going to subtract the price. The only thing missing are those limits of integration. Well, let's see, what are my boundaries? On the left side, I'm starting at 0, and on the right side, I'm going the whole way to x equals 80. So my limits of integration will be from 0 to 80. All right, let's plug in the specific information for this problem. I'm going from 0 to 80, and the demand function is going to be 50 minus 0.5x. And then I'm going to subtract the price, which is 10. Simplifying that integrand, I'm going to have 40 minus 0.5x dx. I'm now ready to integrate. The integral of 40 dx is 40x, and I'm going to have 0.5 x squared divided by 2. And that whole thing will be evaluated from 0 to 80. I can plug in my upper limit. 40 times 80 is 3,200. And then I'm going to subtract what happens when I plug 80 into 0.05. This will be 6,400 all over 2. Now, don't forget, you have to subtract what happens when you plug in the lower limit. But that's an easy one. When you plug in the lower limit of 0, you just get 0. So this will be 0 minus 0. And the total is $1,600. So your consumer surplus is $1,600. All right, it's time to talk about the producer surplus. The producer surplus is the difference between the price that's actually paid and that minimum price needed for suppliers to be willing to supply the product. Well, that's going to be the area of this region, the region between the horizontal line representing the price and the supply curve. Again, we know that we can calculate the area of a region by using a definite integral. But this time, what does our definite integral look like? Well, we're going to have our top function, which is the horizontal line, minus our bottom function, which is the supply curve. So this time, we're going to have 10 minus the supply curve, which is 0.125x dx. And again, don't forget we need our limits of integration. We're going from 0 to 80. So from 0 to 80. Okay, it's time to integrate. So I have 10x minus 0.125x squared divided by 2. And I'm going to evaluate that from 0 to 80. Plugging in the upper limit, I'm going to have 800 minus, and 0.125 is the same thing as 1/8. So 1/8 divided by 2 is 1/16, and 80 squared is 6,400. When you do this number crunching, you end up with $400 for the producer's surplus. I hope this was helpful. Thanks.